Well, Gold's Rounds is the newest book out there, and I couldn't wait to get a copy. The author is former physician-in-chief of the Montreal General Hospital, the first director of the McGill Cancer Center, and I could read his CV all day long, but we don't have time, is Dr. Phil Gold, former Cote-saint-Luc resident, joining us. Dr. Phil, thanks for being with me today.
My great pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you. And the first question I have, I devoured that book in one sitting. Why did you decide to write a book?
It's an interesting question, actually, because it's not that straightforward. I had retired after 60 years at McGill, and the epidemic was on. One of my then colleagues, a former student, said, "We don't want you in the intensive care unit. Please go home to Mrs. Gold with our love." So I did. And the question is, what do you do after 60 years of working? And so in trying just to keep myself busy, I thought I'd start to write. And once I started to write, I kept on writing until the book was finished. And what it did was it brought back memories that I'd put aside over the years. I knew that a lot of what I was going to write about would be painful, because life is not always joyful all the way through. But there were good and bad times, but all of it was wonderful. I came out of it better than I went in. I learned a lot about myself that I'd forgotten or that I never even knew. But at the end of the day, it was a pleasure to have done it. And looking at it now, I'm just delighted that I did it.
You should be. How long did it take you to write that book, would you say?
About 6 to 8 months.
Okay. So it was a perfect retirement project because it keeps your mind sharp and keeps you busy and focused and stuff like that. And you're leaving a legacy and for your, as you say in the beginning, for your children and your grandchildren.
Yeah, that was the key point, actually. Someone once said to me, I think, being interviewed by Life or one of the other magazines, "Are you happy with what you're leaving behind you?"
Yeah.
So what I'm leaving behind me are my children and my grandchildren. What I've done, someone else would have done at another time, but it would get done.
Right.
My children and my grandchildren are mine.
So, Phil, you're going to be 87 years young soon. And if it wasn't for COVID, do you think that you would still be working every day in the hospital?
I'm not sure. I think that I certainly my students, and I still do some teaching, which is fun.
Okay.
But what I didn't want to ever hear anyone say was, "Is that old guy still around?" So I thought, well, it was just perhaps fate that
Right.
said, "Go home." So I did.
Right. Did you ever think in all your years, I mean, you such a long career in medicine, that you'd live through an actual pandemic? And where do you think we are right now with COVID-19?
I think it's certainly on the decrease, likely because it's a natural phenomenon with pandemics or epidemics. But at the end of the day, it's not going away in the sense of disappearing.
Yeah.
It'll be around like the flu, and we'll probably get our shots once a year for both flu and the RSV and so on altogether. But at the end of the day, I think we're over the hump, and we're on our way out. Where it came from is always the question we're asking. How it got here, I don't know. Was it really an increase in the reactivity of the virus? We'll never know. I sincerely doubt that China did this to us on purpose. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it came from Wuhan, and it's here now and on its way out. Thank God.
Are you living your life more normally now? You at this stage of your life?
Yes, I'm trying to. We're not. Whenever my wife and I decide, are we going to travel? Well, how
Right.
about China, dear? We've been there. How about Japan, dear? We've been there. So at the end of the day, we've done most of our traveling. We're very happy here. Our children are here for Friday night dinner every week. So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, life is good. And I'm not sure if we're going to wander around the world, but we're certainly seeing friends and we're getting out again, which is good.
Yeah. Now, you lived in Cote-Saint-Luc for 20 years on Parkhaven Avenue. You
Exactly.
taught your kids how to ride their bikes at St. Richard's Church. What are some of the memories you have from Cote-Saint-Luc, which you talk about a little bit in the book?
I think that Cote-Saint-Luc was, first of all, it was our first home together. And we enjoyed it thoroughly. The people in Cote-Saint-Luc, as you well know,
Yeah.
are really lovely people to be with. My dearest friends are there, like Mort Levy, for example, whom I've known from
Yep.
grade one. And we are there often, and we spend time with people there. And it's a community like no other that I'm aware of. People in Cote-Saint-Luc feel that they belong to something, unlike where I am now in Westmount. People go out into the street. Hello, how are you? Good. But in Cote-Saint-Luc, you wander out and people talk to you. You know them. They're friendly, and I think it's a wonderful community to live in. It really is. It's special, and I think that we sometimes write it off without realizing how special it is.
Speaking about communities, you grew up on the Main on St. Lawrence Street. You went to Bancroft Elementary School and the old Baron Bing. What are your? I mean, you talk a lot. The book begins almost there. How are your memories from that part of the town?
My life began there. I lived on the Main. When I was 4 years old, I went into the street to play, and I learned that not everybody loves us.
Right.
Us for primarily being the Jewish community.
Yeah.
And I learned that don't cry, don't show weakness. I only cried one other time that I can tell you about. But at the end of the day, it wasn't an easy place, but a good place. One street over or two streets over was Bancroft, going through the lane to Bancroft School. My first day in 1942 at Bancroft School, two very important things happened to me. I met my first real friend, Mort Levy, I talked to him yesterday again. We chatted daily. And the first teacher I had that impacted me like no one else in many ways, Esther Hoffman in grade 1. And what she taught me was that don't try to teach facts, tell stories. And that's how people learn. And from that point forward, I've always used that in teaching. Tell stories. Don't teach facts. Because people forget facts, they remember stories. And then from Bancroft, of course, down the street to Baron Bing, where I think you're an ex-Baron Binger as well.
No,
so
I'm not, but my father-in-law, Reuben, of course, is.
Of course, yes. At the end of the day, the history of Baron Bing is the history of Montreal Jewish community.
Yeah.
And a remarkable place in so many ways. And the people that I met there have done enormous things for me. Mr. Henderson, who was then the principal, and in second year or third year, he invited me into his office and said to me, what are you planning to do? I mean, he became a guidance counselor.
Wow.
Like no one, it was remarkable. And so from there on, we took Baron Bing with us to McGill, which was a whole different experience, because at that time, McGill wasn't quite the way it is today. There were quotas, as you probably know, on the Jewish community. You had to have 10% more for various faculties, and certainly the faculties of law and medicine were locked. But now here is something really, really important. When Mort Levy and I got to McGill, the question was, what are we going to do? I mean, we hadn't really planned ahead, and so not knowing, I said, look, I'll go to zoology, you go to geology, and we'll meet for lunch. We met, and he said, so how was it? I said to him, he's a bloody awful lecturer. He was actually one of the world's authorities in the area. And I said, how about geology? It was spectacular. Only one problem, Saturday morning field trips.
That's right.
I said, okay, we do zoology. So we did zoology, honors physiology, and that's how we got into medicine. If anybody tells you they've planned their lives, no, they haven't. Three things I think I mentioned in the book as well. You have your genes from your parents and many, many generations before, called the genome. There's the environment, called the epigenome. And there's one other thing, for which I had to coin a term, the fortunome.
Right.
The luck, without luck, I mean, I've seen some very good genes get knocked down by a truck. So luck is a critical issue. And I find myself to have been extraordinarily fortunate in all the things I've done. Were they all planned? I doubt it very much, but at the end of the day, they seem to have worked out, from which I'm very grateful.
I was very intrigued by that part of the book, because if it was not for those field trips, we may not have had one of the greatest doctors in Quebec history. Two of them, perhaps, Doctors
Yes, okay.
Gold and Levy. So now that was an interesting anecdote. Going back to Bancroft, I've been privileged in my day job at the school board to have you at the school. You've gone back a number of times to speak to students. And the most recent time we were together at 2017 when they had the 100th anniversary. And you and Mort Levy were there. And Bancroft is still going. In fact, I have to tell you, it's experienced a little bit of a renaissance in the last couple of years, because a lot of young families are moving Anglo families moving back into the plateau.
And I gather that it's also a multicultural school,
Yes.
which is extraordinary in so many ways. And one thing has remained constant. What used to be the Bancroft shop on the corner, now
Yes.
Beauty.
That's right.
Beauty's hasn't changed. And when before he passed on, I'd walk in to have breakfast there with my grandchildren.
Yeah.
He'd say, "I know you. You're famous. You're either a doctor or a lawyer." So
Yes.
much for fame at on St. Irving.
Yes.
But it's a wonderful place and it's a wonderful area.
Yeah, and just FYI, the Baron Bing building, which became Sun Youth for many years, is being repurposed, and in 2 years, or 2 or 3 years, I believe, it's going to become, for at least 7 years, the campus for Face High School, because they have to move out of their building. So we're going to bring back the old. So when that happens, Phil,
Oh,
I'm going to
great!
bring you back to the building to
I would
talk to the
love
kids
to.
at Face in that
Oh,
old
I would
building.
love
Yeah,
to.
it's going to be back as a school for the first time since Baron Bing.
Oh, you know what? Because of course it became Sun Youth under a former Baron Binger. And if you look at what's called the Baron Bing Museum,
Yeah.
the extraordinary people there, and
Yeah.
the question is, how did that all happen? And there had to be something about the place, the area, the culture that
Yes.
allowed it to go on. We had some
Yeah.
extraordinary graduates.
Yeah. So going back to getting into McGill Med School, was there a quota of Jews being allowed into medical school in your day?
Yes, there was. It may just have come off. It wasn't. It wasn't McGill didn't decide that. The government decided that. Stop doing that. So I think they did. And so we went on to med school. Actually, I didn't really apply to med school. One of the other great teachers in my life was Arnold Burgeon, Sir Arnold.
Yeah.
And he said to me, a couple of years of medical school will do you a world of good. I said, Arnold, please. Anyway, I got a call from the then secretary of the medical school, Ms. Peden. And she said, are you coming to sign? And I said, sign what? And she
Yeah.
said, well, Dr. Burgeon said blah, blah. Anyway, I went and I signed the application form, and that's how I got into medical school. If you don't think that's luck, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. Exactly. And hard to believe, but before, you became a doctor, but you worked at Molson Brewery. You sold encyclopedias door to door. You worked in the schmutta industry.
Yes, I did. Yes, I
You had
did.
quite the experience.
Well, at the end of the day, so many things impact your life. Um, Going down on the 55 streetcar to the harbor, and called Le Petit Juif. What wasn't meant in a bad way.
Yeah.
What use no hooks meant, and so on. In fact, there's a story I think I tell where one of those people from the harbor became a patient. And I had spoken to Harvey Barkin at the hospital about getting television sets for the young children coming for radiation therapy
Yeah.
at the hospital. And we should get some TV sets for them. He said, yeah, it's a great idea, but we haven't got the money right now. And one of the fellows that I had met at the harbor was a patient that day. I looked unhappy, I guess. He said, anything wrong? I told him. The next day, 6 television sets arrived.
Oh my gosh.
And I called him and said, I don't do that anymore. We sent back 4. 2 went down to the radiology department, and the kids were a lot happier watching TV while they waited. But all these things, selling encyclopedias was probably one of the best things I ever did, because most of life, as you well know, is what you sell.
Yes.
Whether you sell books or ideas or concepts or tell your patients why they should be taking their medication, it's all the matter of teaching.
Yes.
And learn how to teach. Like Miss Hoffman said, tell stories.
You're right. Another part of the book that really resonated with me, you were an intern. You had a child that came into the hospital, looked like they might have to have their hand amputated. And you were there, and they brought in a surgeon, and you give the guy just a letter. So it wasn't their top surgeon. And that you had already done an examination. You felt on your own, with your inexperience, that the hand could be saved. This doctor came in, said that they were going to have to amputate. And you stood up to this guy and made a scene and could have gotten turfed out. And in the end, the other senior came in and they saved this kid's hand.
Yes,
that was
exactly.
a bold move by you.
At the end of the day, look, you've got to do what you think is right. Regardless of where you're at, what the problems might come at you afterward. But at the end of the day, this kid had his hand saved, and I've never forgotten that. I followed him along. It wasn't a lovely hand, but it was a functional hand.
Right.
And but you not do that. And something very interesting happened after that day. After I had gone down, the nurses, obviously, in the OR were sort of confused about what was going on. Who is this kid yelling? Okay. And when I got to the down to the cafeteria that day, Mrs. Cleghorn, who said to me as I came to the end of the line, "Hang on a second, I have something for you." And she handed me a piece of apple pie. She said, "From the OR nurses, don't change."
What a message. What a
You know,
message that
and
is.
I've never forgotten that. I mean, I've gone to the edge of difficulties many times in many ways over many years. But the thing is, if you think it's true, if you think it's right, don't back down, because you'll be sorry that you have.
Yeah, good story. So now, can you explain that your pride and joy? You're world famous for the CEA. Can you explain to people what the CEA is?
Yeah, sure. When I got to residency, first year of residency, and I remember the floor on 10 West of the Montreal General, a lot of the patients were cancer patients, and both they and their family members were distressed beyond belief. And what we were doing at that time, things had gotten better over time, but we were still giving toxic chemicals and radiation. But it seemed to me there had to be something better to do, something specific to do about treating cancer. So I tried to find whatever that specificity might be. And I knew I was looking for a needle in the haystack. But if you do that, then first get rid of the haystack. And I was able to do that in a couple of ways with bowel cancer, until we found out one molecule that was different in cancer cells that was not present in normal cells. And because we also later found that in embryonic tissue, we called it carcinoma for cancer embryonic antigen, or CEA. And that was the first cancer marker to be described. Many others came after that. Many of the people who described them had spent time in our lab, so that the whole field of immunotherapy began that way. Again, I'm lucky and very proud.
And you talk about in the book how a big pharmaceutical firm bought it for a couple of $100,000, and now it's worth, like selling for millions and millions and millions of dollars. You never even got a commission.
Last year, $3 billion. When the fellow, look, this is what you call good sense. One of them, the people from Hoffman LaRoche, came to see me and said, "We would like to buy the patents."
Right.
We're doing. And my brilliant question was, what's a patent? I tried to get the Medical Research Council at that time involved, the National Cancer Institute, McGill. No one was interested in getting involved in and I understand that. The hospital finally did, and they got $300,000, which was the beginning of the research institute next to the hospital.
Right.
But $3 billion, even 1% would have been a lot of people being supported.
Yes.
I got my dollar and I lost the dollar.
Phil, I love the story about how you met your wife. It sounds to me like it's out of one of those Hallmark movies, because it doesn't seem real. You met her, you forgot her phone number, and then many, many months later, you were basically fixed up on a blind date, not knowing who she was. She opens the door, and there she is. It was Beshert.
I met her twice, exactly. The first time I was proud. It was during my drinking days when you were in med school, etc., etc. And I'd forgotten to write everything down. But then again, I met her the next time when one of my fellow students in Med 1 introduced me. I went up there, and there she was, beautiful as ever. And we haven't been apart since, some 65 years.
Evelyn, and some great picture. She was definitely a beautiful woman, still is today. I met her the last time I saw her was at Bancroft School, when she was your date with Mort Levy and his wife, Marcia, who I know as well.
Exactly right.
There was a great double date that night.
Doesn't change, kiddo. It doesn't
That's
change.
it. So how proud are you, the McGill Cancer Center, now the Morris and Rosalind Goodman Cancer Institute? How proud are you of that establishment?
Very much so. I mean, it's remarkable. It makes McGill one of the centers for cancer therapy internationally. The project's ongoing now with Morag Park as the director, and people like Nachum Sonnenberg, who's a remarkable individual, maybe our first Nobel laureate in 100 years. Just a superb group of people doing wonderful work, and just they have a Phil Gold lecture now, which I go to with great pride.
Right.
Just watching what's developed and evolved is extraordinary, and I'm extraordinarily proud of that.
And those years as physician in chief, that was 15 years of your life where you were really the top gun in the hospital.
And it was wonderful, actually. I remember walking down the hall one day with Harvey Barkin, who was then the administrative director of the hospital. And I said to him, we have a problem. I said, Sam Friedman is now the dean of medicine. You're the director administratively, and I'm the chief of medicine. If anything goes wrong, we're looking at a pogrom. You know. Anyway, but it was great fun, and in those 15 years, I was able to restructure the department in many ways. And when I left behind me a group of people of whom I'm very, very proud. See, the nice part about being an academic is you're allowed two families, one that's biologic,
Yeah.
of which I'm extraordinarily proud, and
Yeah.
one which is academic, which also brings much nuckus in many ways.
Right. So, Phil, you're the proud dad of three. When I was looking at the pictures, I realized I saw a picture of your son Ian with his red hair, and I said, that guy was on my baseball team.
Yes.
I mean, I saw the picture of him at that age. I didn't put two and two together. And so you have three kids, you have grandchildren, and I guess that's given you a lot of pride.
That's exactly right. And Ian, of course, interestingly, Ian is now the chairman of philosophy.
Yes. Yes.
So things go round and round, yes, and they've all done. Josie is a graphic designer. Joel is a psychiatrist in New York. So at the end of the day, knock us from all sides. Thank God. Thank God.
Exactly. So my final question is, what is your advice? And you've done this many times, to somebody watching this video whose son or daughter or they themselves want to become a doctor. What do you recommend?
Think carefully, because it's not an easy job to do. There are great difficulties involved, but at the end of the day, if you want to do it and you think it's for you, don't stop. Go somewhere, do something, become the physician, become the surgeon, become the psychiatrist, become the person that's going to make things better for people as you go forward. So don't ever back down on that. We, as you well know from just reading the papers these days, we desperately need good people in medicine. Whether it's doctors or nurses or technicians, we desperately need them. So don't anybody please back down. Go and do it if you want to, and you'll be saving lives.
Your book is a must-read. It's available on Amazon. It's available at Bibliophile on Queen Mary, and hopefully it'll be available also at the Cote-Saint-Luc Public Library, where we'll certainly invite you potentially for a visit. So thank you very much for your time, and best of luck.
My pleasure, Mike. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it.
It was great having Dr. Phil Gold as my guest today.